Hello and welcome to the Liberty Revolt
What's up, guys?
Capitalist Chat. It's your boy, the anarcho-optimist, Kevin, the kid.
And
Hey,
Bucky.
Bucky. Hey, Bucky. The wonderful Bucky Dillon, host of,
true.
co-host, co-patriot at the Liberty Revolt with myself. Bucky, what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be
So I'm
talking
going
about
to be bringing
capitalism.
on a friend of mine, Savvy Wolfson, who is in my leadership program of the Rockies class with me. We have some required reading: economics in one lesson and Atlas Shrugged. These crazy people expect me. Let me hold up. This is just A Brave New World, Aldous Huxley. This is what I happen to have on my desk. Look at the size of this book.
Yes.
Look at the size of Atlas Shrugged. This is like 3 Bibles, and they want me to read this thing. I'm like, dear Lord. And I've tried listening to the audiobook. The voice is horrendous.
You got to find a good one. You got to find that's the thing about audiobooks. But which book do you what's the book you got to read before you read Atlas Shrugged though? You got to be reading.
What is it? That she has Anthem, and then she has the Fountain.
Yep, the Fountainhead. The Fountainhead is the one that you want to get first, ladies and gentlemen. Though, Ayn Rand is an absolutely incredible author. She is by far and away an objectivist, and of course, according to Murray Rothbard, a socialist. So, if you want to give Atlas Shrugged a chance, who is John Galt? But, ladies and gentlemen, please, I'm just gonna bring her on. We're just gonna get going. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Savvy Wolfson. Wow, I suck.
Thanks, Kevin.
Hey, what's up, Savvy?
Hi.
How are you doing?
Welcome. How's your day going so far?
Horrifically busy, but I've been looking forward to this all day. So let's just jump in. What?
Lucky, what are you saying over there?
Can I even be heard? I just feel like I'm just like not even.
I'm leaving you openings, and you're like waiting, and then we're talking at the same time. Like,
yeah,
I must be on a delay.
I think you actually might be. But anyway, so what were you saying there, Savvy?
Oh, I'm really looking forward to talking to you guys, and thanks so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know why you'd be looking forward to talking to Bucky. I dread these days more than anything.
Well, I like the introduction, and I think, Kevin, we might be a little bit different on our views on Ayn Rand, so maybe we'll get into that. So
I mean, I do appreciate Ayn Rand quite a bit, but I have only read sections of Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead because I just don't have the time to sit and read that right now. I'm reading the Gulag Archipelago, which is difficult enough. That thing is 24 hours long on audiobook, but that's
only
the abridged version.
Only 24.
That's the abridged version. The full version is like 80 hours, and that guy wrote that crap by memory. Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote it by memory. No wonder it brought down the entire Soviet Union. But guys, let's talk about a little leadership program of the Rockies. So as the person who is not a member of this grand, prestigious education block, describe to our audience, what is the leadership program of the Rockies, Savvy?
I was trying to describe it to one of my friends, and it's really kind of a conservative think tank. It's a class. But it's also a network of people who are the Army for Freedom in Colorado, and they are opening up more classes in other states. But the whole idea is freedom over force, and trying to find the principles of the American founding. I find a lot on the right that people are not necessarily ready to defend their ideas because they don't have the foundation. So the first class that we did last month was all foundational. And this next month, Yaron Brooks of the Ayn Rand Institute is coming.
Ooh.
I know. I have waited to talk to this man for years. I followed him online. And like I said, I'm not even an Ayn Rand super fan, but I like Yaron Brooks. So I'm really excited.
If you're a big fan of Yaron Brooks, and You want to hear an interesting discussion on Ayn Rand? So Michael Malick and Yaron Brooks take very different views of Ayn Rand, and they went on Lex Fridman's show. I'm pretty sure it was Lex Fridman, and they had a 3.5 hour long conversation, almost 4 hour long conversation, and they discussed that a lot. If you really want to hear Yaron Brooks getting challenged intellectually and having a really deep intellectual discussion about all their various ideals of libertarianism and freedom. I would strongly suggest going and checking out that podcast he did with Michael Malice. It's absolutely amazing, but he is an incredible thinker. Bucky, have you ever listened to Yaron before?
Yes, I have. He's great. He's really good at talking about actually China. He's got some good stuff on China's economic system and their economic history that I think is really great. I don't know if I would call LPR a conservative think tank. It seems as though a lot of them, I guess it used to be called the Republican Leadership Program, but a lot of them are actually pretty libertarian leaning.
It's hard. The first day they're like, don't say conservative, don't say the right, don't say Republican. It is right of center, I would say, but there are a lot of libertarians that are jumping on board with what's right of center right now. And I think I'm more libertarian too. I guess I'm kind of a rhino in the sense that I'm using the Republican Party as a vehicle for libertarianism, but yeah. I'm not totally like, yay, GOP,
Well, let's put it this way. If Republicans understood economics, they'd be libertarians. So, there's very little difference in honesty. Honestly, there's very little difference between true American conservatism and libertarianism, because if you're trying to return to the roots of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, it is libertarian. So, and this was founded as a very libertarian country. So I think that it's more or less that the conservatives are finally returning to their roots, and you're just sitting there like, hi, welcome back. It's nice to have you back over here.
Yeah. So, what do you think of Rand Paul? Like, are you on what about that kind of GOP movement?
Well, I'm a huge Ron Paul guy. I love Ron Paul. I think that he was an incredibly brave and courageous person. He stood up on a stage in 2007 and told the former mayor of New York City that the wars that in Afghanistan and Iraq were total lies, that we got lied into there. They're only making things worse in the region, and our presence in the Middle East is in fact what led to 9/11. So further continuing that presence was only going to make things worse. I think that he's incredibly courageous, and I think Rand Paul is picking up on that from his father. He is absolutely taking it to the politicians right now, because he's a doctor, and first and foremost. And so watching what Rand Paul's doing, he's actually, because he's got his dad at home who's kind of sitting there like, I am the greatest libertarian of the recent age, so you got a lot to live up here. He's starting to be more reminiscent of what conservatism at its best is. And I have zero issue with that in the GOP movement. I would love to see more of that. It gets closer and closer to libertarianism every day. And Bucky, I don't know how you feel about, if you agree with me on that at all, but what I'm seeing from the Rand Paul type Republicans, type conservatives, is really heartwarming to see in the movement, because it's just a return to our roots in liberty.
Right. I think the Republicans in the 90s got off track, to say the least. I think that ruined conservatism for an entire generation. I don't like to blame the progressivism we see now, particularly with young people, exclusively on the left took over education and the left took over culture, and Obama was savvy on social media. I also like to say, you know what? I never heard any of that when I was in school. But what I did hear was a lot of people talking about, the wars and George Bush, and that turned me off forever. Right. So I have never been a Republican. Even when I was a conservative, I still thought, Republican was a very nasty word. And as I've continued exploring, because I think I've mentioned before, I started out a Bernie bro, and I have transitioned. I went like provocative right for a little while, and then I became more, I wouldn't call it alt-right. I went provocateur right for a little bit. And then I got into more of the, just conservative ideas and thinking. And then I just have slowly and surely just kept moving more.
Did
and
somebody
more
introduce you
explicit.
to an essay that might have had a very big impact on your thinking?
Rothbard is great. I don't think I am totally on board.
You're not
I
an
think he won
anarchist,
me
but
over. I think he won me over quite
you
a
don't have to
bit.
agree. You don't have to agree with everything someone
But
says,
yeah,
bud.
right. Thank you. But no, nobody named Kevin has ever had any kind of influence on my political thought processes at all. If anything, they've made me want to go the opposite direction pretty quickly. Anyways, I would say that LPR is a 9-month series of classes focused around civics, economics, fundamental political principles, and tries to find people with leadership potential and give them the knowledge and the public engagement skills that they need to be effective communicators and hopefully persuade people that our ideas are worth fighting for. So I'm very excited to be in it, and I'm having a lot of fun. I'm glad the classes are only once a month, because there's no way that I would be able to take on anything more than what I'm taking on in my life right now. And frankly, getting through Atlas Shrugged is at least going to take me 9 months.
It's long, man. It's so freaking long.
There's so much fluff in it. There's so much.
There's so much fluff.
I tried to read it. I used to have a paper route, and I would do audiobooks and podcasts during that time. And I tried Atlas Shrugged, and I got halfway through the audiobook, and the guy's voice was awful, and I couldn't. And I was like, I get the point. If you squeeze the producers too much, they'll stop producing for you, and then they'll try to find alternate ways to do what they're doing. But I tried to listen to another audiobook that had that guy's voice after, and it brought me back to that place that I was in listening to Atlas Shrugged the first time. And I couldn't even listen to the other audiobook thanks to the Atlas Shrugged one. It was awful.
And he uses the same vocal style and inflections for every single character, regardless of the character. And they're doing all this character development and trying to produce all these different personalities, but he talks the same way when he's quoting them. And it's so bad.
He gets that he gets in a sleepy mode. He just sounds like he's falling asleep.
It's somehow over dramatic and yet totally dry at the same time. But I stand by what I texted you this morning, that I'm not into the storyline, and I'm not into fiction novels at all. I've never read a fiction novel in my life.
Oh, wow.
And so this is so not what I'm into.
You've never read a fiction novel in your life?
I don't think I ever read a book in my life until I was 29, ever, for any reason.
All right.
But seriously, what I told you earlier, I don't need to read 2,000 pages of fictional erotica literature to understand that Bernie Sanders is a dickbag, and we should let capitalism help us extract every tiny shred of productivity and genius from Elon Musk that we possibly can.
And I think what nobody ever talks about with Ayn Rand is if you're conservative, a lot of times you're pro-family. She really, really, really wants to empower the individual, but the family is totally missing from her worldview. And you see that in Atlas Shrugged, because there's so much, there's so many sex scenes, and she's just sleeping her way through all these guys. And that's fine. I mean, I would be the last person to say sex is not a normal part of life, but it would be a lot more realistic if she halfway through the book gets pregnant. It's just totally
it's a disease.
Not
she's
part of
But here's the thing. To be fair, I've seen Ayn Rand, and she's not the world's most good-looking woman. And if she's spending this much time writing, I imagine that she's just infusing her personal loneliness and urges into the book, and you're why? She's just living out her fantasies.
Ayn Rand was not a lonely human being. I will tell you that right now. Ayn Rand was a very lively social person.
But it does sound like pain. It sounds like she's writing from a place of pain.
Well,
so again, you have to read.
Had some drives, man. She had some.
That's the reason why the problem is that people just read Atlas Shrugged. The Fountainhead is what you have to read first, because the Fountainhead is where she really does a great great job of expressing the ideals that are underlying everything, expressing the ideology, really exploring what it means to be objectivist, and really exploring what all the other themes that are present within Atlas Shrugged are all about. And it does a lot. If you read The Fountainhead, you have a much better understanding of what is going on when you actually get to Atlas Shrugged.
Is it shorter?
It is, but that's really not saying much.
Yeah,
but
is it at least she wasn't one Bible?
Yeah, only one. No, like the thing about it is that the story, it does get very dry. And by the way, so I'm hearing that if you do want to listen to the audiobook, you have to listen to the one done by Scott Brick, because he actually fully voices all the actors, and he adds tons of inflection and actually makes it sound interesting and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, she is an objectivist, or she really she leans that way. And because some people will look at it and say she was a libertarian. No, there's a difference between the objectivism and the libertarianism. Objectivism understands that reality does exist, and that there are some that you cannot do what goes against reality, in a sense.
And the libertarians totally don't.
No, I'm an anarcho-capitalist, man. I believe in Ancapistan and the utopia of everyone just treating each other like they want to be treated. That's all I want.
Excellent.
I think utopia is a good word for that, but okay.
No, I mean, like I said,
here's the difference between the left-wing utopianism and the Ancapistan utopia. Kevin doesn't scare me. His utopia is like, I'm going to leave you alone. Just screw off. And the other people are like, we're going to dominate your life. The other people are like, let's implement 1984. Like, we are the thought police. So if
I want to dominate your language.
I think it's a little unworkable in some ways, and I have a hard time seeing really.
There's a reason why the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, Bucky. There's a reason why the Constitution and the Bill of Rights
move the ball down the field.
Is only 90% of the way there, because there is the 10% of the national protection that really does need to be considered. But outside of that, like I say, AOC is beautiful. I love AOC. The Articles of Confederation, because they were the most libertarian government. They set up the most libertarian government that's ever happened. See, the thing is that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights gives the government a monopoly on the currency and a monopoly on the violence, and allows for the creation of a military, which is, it's fun and all, especially when they're bombing children in By the way, Bucky, you saw that, right? You posted about it, yeah. The Pentagon did an investigation into the Pentagon and found that the Pentagon did no wrong when the Pentagon allowed for the killing of 7 children in an AWOC.
Didn't they find that it wasn't even an accident? I was like,
the guy literally came out and was like, we followed the same procedures and intelligence that we had good intelligence. We followed the same procedures we've been following for 20 years. And I'm like, no wonder there's so much radical anti-America sentiment in that part of the world. Like, imagine for 1 second if another country did to us what we just did in Kabul, like just bombed a car full of children.
Imagine if another country bombed a hospital or bombed one of our schools. What do you think that would do to us? You think we'd be like, no, that's perfectly fine. Killed a bunch of people at a wedding in the woods. Like, do we think that wouldn't radicalize some people? It's like, it would. But they said there wasn't negligence. There was no misconduct or negligence. So they meant to kill those children. Like, they did it on purpose, apparently. And I love the stance that they use to try to keep us in the war. They're like, think of all the children we're now subjecting to, all this rule. I'm like, think of all the women and everything. I'm like, what are you going to tell them? Either you give your women rights or we'll blow them up in their cars. Like, we'll hit them from the sky.
Would you have done the Afghanistan pullout differently? Like, I'm reading that you would have just not pulled out without. I mean, there's writing season to be over.
Look, like I said, so I am an anarchist or an ANCAP by trade, or by principle, but I'm also somewhat of an objectivist myself, because I do acknowledge that there is a reality to the world. As much as I would not have wanted to have been in Afghanistan, I acknowledge that we were there. So the goal then is to mitigate suffering on the removal of our troops from a situation they don't need to be in. I was fully aware about the Afghans' presence of the ghost army that they had, where basically half of the army didn't even exist. There was incredible tactical nightmares going on, especially with refueling and all this other kind of stuff. Because one of the big problems, and you saw it almost immediately from the start of the withdrawal, was that the Taliban just started plowing through provinces up into the north, heading down into from the rural areas into the urban parts of Afghanistan, which are very small. It's because there's a lot of the outposts that were being manned by the Afghan National Army required resupply via the air, and we completely removed that. So what it comes down to is acknowledging the reality of we were there. This was the most incompetent thing I've ever seen. Like was the level of at every single opportunity they made the incorrect decision, right? Like,
and these which are notorious for their incompetence, and this was like setting a new bar.
Well, let's see here. Option A: which airport do we keep? Do we keep the one that is situated in as a military base, Kabul air base, or is it was it Kandahar there? It was, yeah. So we have Kandahar, or Bagram. I fucking forget. I can't remember. I was in the army and I can't even remember. We have CAF there, yeah, which has 3 runways and is completely set up to provide protection and has actual defenses and perimeters and everything in place. Or the civilian airport that has none of that has a single airway where if a single mortar hits it, it's out of commission and we're done. Whereas the other one has anti-mortar systems that will shoot them out of the sky. Yeah, let's go with the civilian one. Okay, cool. So are we going to pull everyone out first, or are we going to pull the military out first? Let's pull the military out first. Okay. So are we going to make sure that the Afghan army is going to be able to operate the vehicles that we're handing over to them to maintain air supply and resupply? Maybe we should resupply, give them enough supplies that we have at least a couple months of leeway when we leave. No, we're not going to do that. Should we pull out in the winter when there's literally a fighting season in this, or should we pull out in the middle of the summer when everyone's actually out fighting? I don't like the cold. Let's pull out in the summer. Everything they did was wrong.
How does it work with your anarchism?
What?
And the threat that is China. I mean,
China's not a threat.
You don't think China's a threat?
Absolutely, China's not a threat. Are you kidding me? The Chinese military has to put bombs in the helmets of their soldiers to make sure that they don't drop their weapons and flee at the first sign of violence. I'm not scared of that military. I'm not scared of the military that has, again, because people will point out, China just tested a hypersonic missile, bloody freaking blah. Well, yeah, they revealed that. We do not reveal where our military technology is at. We do not reveal any of that kind of stuff. We have top secret for a reason, and we have DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Program, out in the middle, out in the middle of the desert doing stuff that we will never see, that is so far beyond anything we could ever imagine that we won't know how much more advanced we are than China until we have to go to war with China. But China is not a threat. They do not have the naval capability. They do not have the air capability. They do not have the soldiering capability. They're already at a 50 million human deficit for between men and women. They could throw them at a meat grinder, but again, the problem that China also has right now is they have probably the laziest male generation that they've ever had. They have an economic system that is more on the verge of collapse than our own. And when it finally does collapse, they've been protecting that bubble for so long that it's gotten so large. When it finally does pop, China is going to completely and utterly collapse. They're spreading themselves beyond thin. India, which is right on the border with China, which has much more battle-hardened military troops, which has a much better supply of men that are able to fight in the war, although it's not the best in the world, and has a population that will be topping China's pretty soon here, will be able to prevent any kind of expansion in the region because, oh, by the way, they really freaking hate China. No, China is a threat in that it gives neocons and neoliberals a way to continue the support for our military to the tune of over $1 trillion per year in the budget. China has everything. No, unless they're going to make the argument to me that communism is a better system of governance and economics, and therefore China's expansion of their empire outwards is going to work. Britain didn't work, France didn't work, Belgium didn't work, America's didn't work, and we're all capitalist countries. Unless they're going to make the argument that communism is better, then all they're going to do is accelerate their collapse at this point. I mean, Bucky, I know he has a little bit of a different outlook. Yeah,
I think Kevin is drastically underestimating China. Obviously, I'm very familiar with China. I think they are not revealing everything they have, and I think they do have a lot of advantages that we don't, one of which is the fact that I don't think they're going to militarily and conquestually overextend themselves like we have. I think, one, they have far more credibility on the world stage than we do, because look at what we do. Look at what we do. We make a deal.
Don't
with
mistake
people.
Us having bad credibility Kevin, for them having more.
I just let you go for like 8 minutes.
Sorry.
Okay? Thank you. We make a deal with people, and then 4 or 8 years later, we completely undo it, right? We sign a peace treaty with somebody, and then we just completely blow through it, right? We just make these completely botched mass scale military engagements over and over and over. When was the last time we won a war? When was the last time we didn't actively seek to get engaged in a war, right? There's a lot of things that when international communities are looking to make economic trade deals, they would rather go with China. They'd rather go with China, because when China says they're going to make a plan and stick to that plan, for the most part, they stick to the plan, at least far more effectively than we do. They lead the world in the industries of the future: quantum computing, quantum mechanics, AI technology, semiconductors, green technologies, so-called, whether you believe that or not. There's a bunch of industries that we have been drastically neglecting. I mean, the thing with the whole manpower is we also have a pretty pathetic male population at this point. Regardless of that, many of the technologies coming out are going to make foot soldiers basically null and void. If you can completely shut off somebody's power grid, you can completely shut off their communications. You can shut down. And our economy is essentially the same as theirs. It doesn't matter whether you have socialism or communism. What is your currency, right? If the people who control the currency can inflate it or deflate it out of existence or out of relevance, then it really doesn't matter if you have capitalism or if you have communism. Apart from that, what they have is not a communist economic system, although they are clamping down more. In many ways, they have a much freer system than ours. When I was over there, they have the most thriving black markets. As long as you don't interfere with their political establishment, you can get away with anything. You don't need licenses. It's basically a free-for-all trade kind of environment, and they're willing to break whatever rules. They'll put rules in place so they look good, but they don't enforce the rules so long as it helps them. So in many ways, they're not economically communist. They have pseudo property rights. They have pseudo capitalist kind of structures, and they've actually been much more strategically smart about when they're going to step in and regulate and manipulate their economy and when they're not. We do almost exactly the same things that they do. We are just as communist as they are. We just pretend we're not.
Well, it's a different style thing, because at the end of the day, the Chinese Communist Party is 6% of their population. I do want to push back on the idea that they lead the world in technologies that you mentioned that are specifically top secret, that we don't know where our own position is at. So when you're talking quantum mechanics, quantum computing, AI, that kind of stuff, we as the American people will not know. They put that stuff out there because they want the world to know that they're near the top, right? They need the world to know. We don't do that kind of stuff because, our government, doesn't do that kind of stuff, because we, like, the United States is the pinnacle. Whether you, especially on the credibility side, China has no credibility. Like, we have bad credibility. China doesn't have any credibility. No one in the world stage actually gives China credibility. What they give China is respect that China, not the Chinese Communist Party, but China as a culture and China as the oldest living, surviving culture on planet Earth. That is the advantage China has, and that's why I don't think they're a threat as well, because China's not stupid enough to do anything that actually will threaten the existence long-term of what China is. And they're very slow-moving, and they're very good at being patient. They're not going to do anything that's going to threaten that. They know they cannot win a war, despite the fact that, yes, we have a very weak civilization. We have a weak men right now. What China has over there is even worse, right? Half of our country, at the bare minimum, will take up arms in a heartbeat and be able and capable of fighting. We have more men that are going to be able to fight. You're looking at a Chinese country that where only about 20% of the water they even have in their country is drinkable. They have most of the people that live in their major cities legitimately do live by UN guidelines in water deprivation because of how little clean water they actually have as a nation. They are struggling right now to provide enough food for their nation. But at the end of the day, we're interdependent with them as well. And there is no opportunity for a nation who is independent on trade to go to war with each other, which is why I'm in support of the pipeline between Germany and Russia, because that gives them a reason not to go to war. And if you look at what Germany's done, they are the most warmongering country on planet Earth over the last 100 years. Not even America can top it, because we didn't start the world wars, right? But I look at China. They are not. It's not that they're not a threat necessarily. Like on the global stage, just as realpolitik goes, they are always going to be a threat, and they're China. But if you're looking at, can China do damage to America? No, China cannot do damage to America. When we talk about our national debt, they own about like under 10% of it. They don't really have much of our national debt. Our economy, yeah, there's a lot that goes through. You are correct, very much so, on the superconductors, and you are very correct on a lot of the other factors that you brought up, Bucky. But I do not underestimate China. I give China quite a bit of respect, but at the same time, I also do not underestimate America, and I do not underestimate the American people, and I do not underestimate the rest of the NATO alliances. There is currently, I think, like 7 different nations' navies sitting between China and Taiwan right now.
So one thing you didn't mention, because we were talking about sort of the military power relating to Afghanistan and having our closest base in Afghanistan. So we kind of got started talking about military. But one thing you didn't mention is their slow creeping infringement on our culture. And it's very deliberate throughout media and Hollywood and Disney. I mean, I was watching Frozen 2 with my kids, and I noticed one of the songs was like really collectivist. I don't even remember what it was now. But I had to like pause and explain to my kids about why we are not collectivists and then resume. And like, I kind of have moved away from Disney, and I hate to be like such a killjoy and like almost like fundamentalist. But I don't like funding that. I literally feel like I'm at some level like funding something that's as evil as Nazi Germany.
No, and that's fair, especially with the concentration camps. And I'll just give my 2 cents really quick, Bucky, and then I'll let you go on it as well. What's going on in the culture is obviously movies. We want to be present in their culture, but it's a double-edged sword. The same weapon that gets them into our country gets us into theirs, which is why you see such a hold on, or not such a stranglehold on a lot of our entertainment. But here's the problem: they only let so many of our movies over there any given year. And what you noticed through what John Cena did with Fast and Furious 9, what happened with there was another movie recently where one of the actors. Was it Shang-Chi? I think it was the recent Disney Kung Fu movie. That one I don't think was allowed over there because the lead actor spoke out, or one of the actors spoke out. So it is a double-edged sword. And a lot of these companies, first and foremost, China's starting to remove our ability to enter into their market. And then second off, China is doing a lot to like I said, it's a double-edged sword, because now they're getting very restrictive of the content that's allowed in, and a lot of movie companies are going, like, granted, getting your market is really good, but abiding by your market regulations is making it so people in America don't want to watch our movies anymore. And America is still the biggest market on planet Earth for everything. China, it could be big. If China was capitalist, it would be the biggest in the world. But
they also have the manufacturing power too, and like wherever you stand on the pandemic,
that's moving.
They did like restrict our access to PPE, and if there had actually been like yellow fever or something like that where we actually really needed it, they can cripple our supply chain whenever they feel like it.
So that is specifically, they do have a huge share of our medical production, and that needs to change.
80% of our pharmaceuticals. They do 95%.
So you know more about this, Bucky, than me.
Mining. Yeah, they do 95% of the world's rare earth mineral mining, precisely because you can't have green energy standards and then like things like that, and also be the world's biggest producer in those arenas, because those black rare earth mineral mines require essentially black markets in order to operate. They're so devastatingly horrific towards the environment, which is exactly why in the Paris Climate Accords it was like, we're going to crack down on the United States, and we're going to make sure that the United States is following all these measures, and we're not going to say anything to China, because all of our solar panels and all of our pharmaceutical drugs are coming from those rare earth mineral mines, and we're not going to say anything because that'll devastate us. Yeah. And China's the only one that's willing to be that big, nasty kind of armpit polluter, to make it happen. So they're like, well, we're going to let you keep polluting, because if we do it, our people will be mad at us. And we want to look good. We got this white guilt thing going on. So we're just going to outsource our polluting to China and let them get rich off it. But yeah, I am in almost every way a extremist capitalist, laissez-faire capitalist, whatever you want to call. I do have some concerns when it comes to not being, to some degree, self-sufficient. I think we should, at least in the case of war and emergency, because unfortunately we live in a world where there are pandemics and wars and things like that. We need to be somewhat self-sufficient when it comes to our energy and our food and our steel. Just a few things. And that doesn't mean that, I think we should be self-sufficient only in our own little pocket, because I do think it's good to have trade. But I think when we are in open and active, aggressive competition, pseudo warfare with another country, perhaps we shouldn't be relying on them for basic necessities. And then, wow, they let a pandemic slip out, they cover it up while they simultaneously hoard all the PPE from the rest of the world, and then extort foreign governments to be their propaganda mouthpieces, so long as they want to have any access whatsoever to that PPE.
Yeah. How do you feel about China, Savvy?
She thinks it's great. She really loves it. She's looking forward.
What do you think about what Bucky and I have been saying?
I have a lot of brothers and sisters, and we're a very international family. So I have a brother and his wife that are currently there, and I hear stories. And then my sister-in-law is Chinese, and she immigrated to the U.S. a couple of years ago.
Sounds like a terrible person.
Yeah, because she's Chinese, so she's definitely communist. No, but
my wife is Chinese and communist.
Is she actually? Oh, I'd love to meet her. I mean it. But anyway, so my sister-in-law, like when I first met her, I was like 20. And little innocent me didn't know a lot about China. And I remember like one of the first conversations we had, like it came up that she didn't know anything about Tiananmen Square. And I was like, oh, well, you need to know about this. And my brother like really quickly changed the conversation. And then came to me later on, and he was like, you can't tell her anything about this because her family is still in China. And they will threaten her father, and that's a soft spot for her. And I was like, oh, like she actually can't even access information. So how do I feel about China? I hate the Chinese Communist Party, but I love people all over the world, and I feel like they are an oppressed people. I think a lot of them don't even know that they're oppressed because they've never known anything else.
Yeah. I think that's a very good point you make.
Well, and to put it in perspective, when my father-in-law was here, and most of them actually do know about 1989. I've had tough conversations with some of my former Chinese roommates about stuff like that. And her family, I mean, they haven't shut down word of mouth, and it's not to the point to where if I tell my wife about Tiananmen Square that her father and mother are going to be endangered over there. I mean, the information's out there. They try to suppress it, but the information's out there. There's still bullet holes in the fucking concrete, and everybody knows what that's from. You can't hide the
They didn't replace
legacy.
The concrete.
There's still bullet holes. In fact, I think they leave them there on purpose. My opinion. What do I know? Right?
Actually, no, that makes sense. Just real quick, because I want to let you finish why that makes sense. Because like the juxtaposition of removing it from everywhere and still leaving the evidence that it happens is just a show of force, I think.
Yeah.
Exactly. But
intimidation.
So when I was asking my father-in-law, who was a member of the PLA, he literally has statues of Mao Zedong in the house, idolizes him, thinks Mao was the greatest military genius.
Chiang Kai-shek.
And so I asked him, I was like, well, what about the millions, of dead bodies? What about this? What about that? And he was like, you know what? We were ravished. Speaking of Chinese as a country, they see the last 100 years where they've been a broken and developing poor country as an anomaly. And if you look at world history, it is basically true. It's been an anomaly.
Outside of
you
Mongolia,
can't study. Yeah, you can't study the history of economics without realizing the history of economics is basically the global effort to trade with China. They've always had the biggest economy. They've almost always had the biggest economy. They invented almost everything, right? But
they invented most things up until about the 1600s, and then capitalism.
And then the United States
revolutionized the game.
Revolutionized everything. But I mean, as far as like where economies stood in human history, China's economy was one of the strongest that ever existed comparatively to the time.
Their culture, their economy, like
in just my father-in-law's lifespan, he saw his mom grow up in complete abject poverty. To this day, she's illiterate. I mean, scrounging for rice left over in the fields, risking potentially being killed to steal some rice and bring it home to her family, to the point to where they were able to save up hundreds of thousands of American dollars, which is worth like 6 times what their currency is worth, to pay up front for their daughter to come to America and take school and get a master's degree in English at CSU, paying for it all up front, no student loan fees, hundreds of thousands of dollars, while paying all of her bills and everything else in one generation. They've watched their cities go from these pathetic little third world things to the biggest and most flashiest cities in the world. And this has all happened in one generation. They poured more concrete in the last 10 years than the United States has ever poured concrete.
But is that a good thing? Because a lot of that concrete went to buildings that do not have anybody in them, went to building cities. They built an entire replica of the city of Paris out in the middle of a fucking desert, and no one is there. That's money. That does. Right. There's a reason there. So I do want to say that, like, I have nothing but faith in China as a people. I know that this is just going to be another one of those 5,000 years from now when they're still talking about the Chinese culture and everything like that, and they're going to be like, well, there was a 100-year period where they went communist following the absolute rape of their nation by Japan, led by, I think one of the big problems is that their country got absolutely just brutalized by Japan in World War II, with Chiang Kai-shek in charge, trying to preach the capitalism game, trying to preach like the more Western style game, and all it got was their country in ruins. And I think that really helped propel them towards. And
Britain
now.
did quite a number on them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But so I've been listening to the Hardcore History Dan Carlin did about Japan in the East in the lead up to World War II and everything. What they did to China, Britain doesn't even come close, man. Does not even come close with what Japan, over the span of those 15 years where they occupied what they occupied in China, the millions of Chinese people they outright butchered, not just killed through like drug addiction, like outright stuck on the end, tossed babies up and caught them on their bayonets kind of deal.
Yep.
So like,
and in fact, there was one city where when the Japanese invaded, they made it a rule that you could not put a woman to death until every member of the Japanese army had a turn raping her.
Nanking, I think it was Nanking is where that was.
The rape of Nanking was a particularly vicious thing. Like the Nazi ambassadors that were in China at the time were considered like they had the moral high ground. Yeah, that's how bad Japan was.
There was a safe zone that included like the Nazi embassy. Like but like immediately following World War II, they went the exact opposite direction. They went with Mao.
Hi, Eric.
It's been, the thing is that China is a very pragmatic people. The Chinese are a very pragmatic people. They're very like very slow to action, but very, very thoughtful throughout their history. So I have no doubt that it's not that I don't think that China as a people has the potential to expand. I don't think China as a communist nation has the potential to expand.
Well, here's an interesting thing that when I asked my father-in-law about the communists, they don't have the history of the history of a culture of rights like we do here. Mm-hmm. They actually look at the Communist Party of China like we look at it and we think, how do you put up with that level of control and authoritarianism? And they go, this is the most liberal it has ever been. Before communism, they had dynasties. And when a dynasty went bad, it went really bad.
Very bad.
Right. Yeah. So it's not like they're looking at it from our perspective that we really take for granted. They're looking at it from, we had top-down authoritarian control that was passed down from one douchebag king, emperor, to his son who grew up a spoiled brat with no respect for anyone. Right. And now we have at least a political party that elects someone they believe is going to be competent, right?
So, and it's great if you're not a Muslim or a Christian or anything but that's where the issue comes in. So long as you toe the line, it's great. It's what makes it evil is what happens when you don't. What happens when, like, the fact that we know so many good things about the Communist Party because to say otherwise means to condemn you and your family to a lot of problems. If you come over to America and your parents are billionaires back in China, my God, we're going to hear nothing but like rainbows and unicorns about China coming from you, because if you don't, all of that disappears. And you asked an earlier question, Savvy, about the like the property and stuff that China has over here. If I was president for a day, I'd say, yeah, you have to be a U.S. citizen or a legal resident in order to buy property. And let's get a little xenophobic with it. You can't be Chinese. That immediately ends it.
That does not work with anarchy.
Yeah, it works with our Constitution.
Okay.
And it works with, and like I said, I believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So it's, I know Ankafistan can't work, but I mean, it does work to an extent. So if the understanding is that there is,
I will agree. I think it's founded on the correct principles. I think it's the only political ideology founded on consistent principle.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that there is absolutely an argument that can be made that if your anarchy can be subverted by an outside nation, wherein they buy up so much property, they do have the power to then influence, and they have different motivations. So you ask me, Bucky, all the time, like, what stops a private company from, just taking your stuff by force? Well, they still have to earn money. They legitimately can't just go in and start taking it from anyone, because then they don't get it anymore. It's much easier to take money when people have, Netflix makes a lot more money over time charging me $15 a month than if they would just say it's $300 up front. They make a lot more money over time charging $15 a month. You make a lot more money over time. Capitalists, it's just good business. However, China has different motivations. They'd have different motivations, they'd have access to different policies that they could put in place that would intentionally subvert the system to the point where it could cause the system to collapse, which is why I like the 10% of the Constitution that isn't necessarily anarchist, which is the military. However, I don't support.
One of the areas where the anarcho-capitalist movement loses me is I feel like there's a whole lot of economists in that realm And not very many military strategists in that realm.
But the argument they make is that as defensive, what we have is the greatest offensive force mankind's ever seen because we are not stretched thin. We have 7 aircraft carriers over in the South China Sea right now. Like we have a bigger air force sitting off the coast of China than China has itself. Not to mention bigger air forces lined up all throughout the islands on the Pacific Rim out there within striking distance of China than China has itself. And that's about a quarter of what we've got. And I think that's way too big, but at the same time, it exists. Therefore, I'm going to be a little bit braggadocious about it because USA all the way. But you get what I'm saying, like on that front, like, there is something to be said that, and the Second Amendment to me, I've said this to Bucky before, the Second Amendment to me reads as if someone like me, who is an anarcho-capitalist, who doesn't want there to be military, they're like, dude, you gotta frickin' do it. I'd be like, fine, being necessary for the maintenance of a free people, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, blah, blah. Like, it sounds like an exasperated libertarian finally conceding the point that maybe we need a military.
Well, the military is in the first part of the Second Amendment.
Militia being necessary to, yeah.
So it's like because a military is necessary, we all should be allowed to bear arms as well to prevent them from turning on us.
Yeah, I just say that the military shouldn't be able to buy a weapon that I can't.
And, this is the interesting question. Nuclear bombs, right? Like, who should be allowed to own it? Should only the government be allowed to wield nuclear bombs, or should Elon Musk?
Yeah,
I mean, but the technology exists and it's not going anywhere. You can't uninvent it, right? It's out there.
Hence why you do need you do need a unified body behind that kind of stuff, because that is a reality. Like, self-defense does not include weapons whose very use cannot not inflict pain on everyone around it. Like a nuclear bomb, even if there's one house 50 miles away that won't be and no one else will be directly impacted by the blast and the wave that comes from it, dropping a nuclear bomb on that house will invariably affect negatively everyone around it.
It has
everyone within.
And then there's weapons that just shouldn't exist, like bioweapons and that kind of thing. So.
But they're going to exist. And frankly, I think we should keep working on them. I haven't ruled out alien life, and I haven't ruled out that alien life might not be our friends, and maybe we're going to want 500 nuclear warheads at some point. I don't know.
Bucky, have you ever considered that the liberalism present in China is there specifically so that people like you from America will see it and come back and say, China's pretty good. They're more liberal than America
is.
I
will agree.
I'm just kidding.
They
I'm just giving you crap.
Outperform us on optics. They're really good at putting on facades. But at the same time, they also wrote the book on lie about how much power you have, but also lie about how much power you have. Right? Yeah. Lie both ways. Over exaggerate what you can do while simultaneously under exaggerating what you can do.
Isn't that like super? That's really true of the left in the US too. Like they are the masters of propaganda.
Yeah.
So.
And the propaganda, I mean, that's one thing that being a free society makes us very susceptible to.
This book right here.
Infiltrate. It's easy to infiltrate.
I have that on my shelf too.
Do you guys want to show off books real quick?
What?
Should we all show off our books?
I'm not in the right room. I'm in my dining room.
Rules for Radicals, The Righteous Mind. Everyone should read it. And
I've heard his lectures on The Righteous Mind.
Oh, it's a great book, by the way, man. If you like, it gives you a really good understanding. I'm an anarcho-capitalist, right? But like, I go out of my way to really try to understand like the human psyche, and like I love psychology and sociology and all these kinds of things, because I think a lot of what there's a lot of people that just look at data and they just look at all that kind of stuff. And it's like, there's a human element to all of this. And that human element is unpredictable. That human element is simultaneously consistent and just incredibly inconsistent. Like, this is why I say, like, there is no way you can replicate the human mind. You cannot. I hate when people try to distill our actions and our thoughts down to just like little neurons within our synapses going off. That's, I have a soul because It doesn't matter if you have every single input I have ever had in my entire life, everything going up into a split second. You will never be able to, with 100% consistency, predict the next action a person is going to take, even with all the data from the previous actions. At any given moment, a human can decide to go against what the data says the decision they should make should be. And that's to me why you cannot deny the soul, because there's something else going on there.
So I'm not like a hardcore like physicist, whatever, but like, isn't there like some kind of law where like sometimes atoms don't like assemble themselves until you look at you observe them?
Yeah, it's Schrodinger's theory. It's the idea. If you've ever heard of Schrodinger's cat, right? Well,
you don't know if the cat's alive or dead.
It's the problem with quantum physics, right? So quantum physics, like at the very down and dirty, the very extent that I understand it, quantum particles, their existence depends on whether they are being observed or not. You cannot tell whether it's flipped on or off. It exists in a state of in between. It's quantum computing. For example, I'll just give a really, really down and dirty of it. Right now, you have binary, right? When you're looking at a computer, it's either a 1 or a 0, right?
Mm-hmm.
Quantum computing means that there is a maybe introduced it. Yes or no? 1 or 0, yes or no? Well, now there's a maybe. And the reason why quantum computing is so sought after is it destroys all encryption immediately, because it is exactly what it needs to be. Like it can be exactly what it needs to be. It's a 1, 0, or maybe in the middle. And so but it doesn't change until you observe it. That's when it will flip to what it needs to be. And so
this has been our episode on Atlas Shrugged, ladies and
gentlemen. And economics. But going back
economics
to they're like the first class that we had, they did talk about how physics proves the existence of God.
Yeah. It's just it's basically all the hard sciences is just discovering the language God used to create the world.
Yeah,
because all of them play by
right.
Yeah.
I don't think people are like, well, doesn't evolution just prove God? I was like, evolution just proves how God did it.
Like he does, snapped his finger, Big Bang occurs with such a specific, precise set of rules that 12 billion years later, monkeys turn into things that can think consciously and start creating and building and actually begin to understand what even the idea of God is. He snapped his fingers.
Bang, right? If an object at rest stays at rest until acted upon by an outside force, what was the initiator of movement in the first place?
And it has to be something that's inherently different from us and inherently eternal.
Yeah. So
otherwise, you just keep going back and back and back and back and back. What created that? What created that? What created that?
I'm going to say something.
You're getting into Spinoza and Leibniz right now.
I'm going to be honest. There have been a handful of times in my life, only a handful of times in my life, where I have genuinely prayed with my entire heart and soul. And every single time I've done that, my prayers have been answered in an almost unexplainable, euphoric kind of way. And you would think with the track record like that, I would be praying all the time. I mean, I still don't, but when things have gotten real, when I've really been put in a spot, I've actually said, you know what, I'm going to pray about it. And I have asked for a sign or I've asked for help and I've gotten it every single time. And I don't know how to explain that.
Yeah, I'm similar. I pray a lot more than just occasionally, but there have been certain prayers in my life that were out of complete desperation and were like total body, total soul, all in praying and same, like they were all answered. And it's not something that I talk about very often because it's also deeply personal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But from a philosophical, because like the Spinoza line of thinking, like older philosopher, like 16th century, but it's like the idea is that we must come from something. We are all produced from something, right? Like there's a natural path. Now they didn't know about the Big Bang. I'm sure if he knew about the Big Bang, Leibniz and Spinoza, they would have been like, oh yeah, cool, God, there you go, perfect. That's what started it all. That makes perfect sense within everything because that event there. but it's like there's also the idea that everyone has a God-shaped hole in their heart. Like there's a reason why basically every single civilization that's ever existed has had gods and has had or a god or had something filling a God-shaped heart that's beyond Earth. And it's like that kind of consistency has to come from somewhere. And for us to be, Spinoza would say that here's a quick question. Think of something that doesn't exist. Like, you can't think of something that doesn't exist. No matter what you're thinking of now.
It's getting good. You came just in time.
Yeah. No matter what you're thinking of now, it's derived from things that do exist. Every alien you see is derived from things that do exist. In every movie, it's derived from things that do exist, right? You cannot think of things that don't exist.
I can think of one thing that doesn't exist.
What?
Your mom's virginity.
Well, yeah, she's dead. Of course it doesn't exist anymore. And so you can't think.
Devastation.
I thought you were going to make it. Oh my goodness! I thought you were going to say something like your anarcho-capitalist utopia or something like that.
Oh no! When people make your mom jokes, I take every full opportunity to make them feel like shit afterwards, and it brings me joy. It brings me joy. Okay, but you can't think of something that doesn't exist. The very idea that you can think of God means that God must, by rule, exist, because as you cannot think of something, you cannot consider the idea of an omnipresent, omnipotent being without that being actually existing, because otherwise you would not be able to consider that being a thing. So
have you guys noticed though, like one of the differences like between republicanism and libertarianism, and I think this is changing, and we're probably evidence of that, is the religious piece, and that there's a lot more atheists on the libertarian side than there are in the Republican camp.
Yeah, I mean, generally.
It's like painting with a broad brush, because I'm an exception.
Well, all the anarchists I love, all the libertarians I love are all for the most part, deeply religious. Tom Woods is a very devout Catholic. Joe.
I'm thinking like the Dave Rubin type crowd.
Oh, he's not a libertarian at all. We're actually bringing him to our campus. So
he's not a libertarian?
Oh God, no, he's not a libertarian, man. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Dave Rubin, but he's not a libertarian.
That was one of the podcasts I used to listen to on my.
Oh, I love him. Yeah,
say it all the time, but
that's his book right there.
Dropped off like when he made his private community. I really, really, really liked Dave Rubin. But it got to the point where like a lot of the shows were the same thing over and over. So I actually started like using it as a way to follow his guests. I was like, oh, that's a person that's very interesting.
That's how I watch it.
Them now.
Yeah, there are some shows that are really great because they have unique and consistently fresh content creators, and there are other shows that are great because they're just a really good interviewer and they have great guests.
Yeah, he's a great interviewer.
He is, and he's a conservative. But Bucky and I were deeply influenced by him when we started our move away from socialism, because he was also like us. Me
too. Same. Yeah. I like shared with a friend, like I'm kind of off that Bernie Sanders bandwagon. She was like, I kind of am too. Also, have you found the Rubin Report? And like I felt like so much less alone after starting to watch it. So
I felt really alone for a while, especially because I was doing music, and everyone I knew in the music scene was viciously progressive, and I was afraid to speak at all because I thought I was just going to be completely socially outcasted. And it took me probably 2.5 years before I started making friends that I felt comfortable talking around. And then probably a year or two after that now I'm here and it just seems like it's part of my identity. Shit.
Do you feel like a lot more like settled in your soul now that you're freedom-minded?
No, not necessarily.
I'm still searching. I feel like I was really unsettled.
I'm wondering when the day comes where I revert back to a socialist.
No, you're too smart for that now.
Who knows? I may just keep following this rabbit hole until I go like I've been everywhere.
Until you go all the way back. Horseshoe theory, bro.
Hey, I've literally considered thinking about like central banking cartels and things like this. Been like, wait a second. Are the Chinese communists the only hope we have of overthrowing the globalist banking cartel? Like, what if they are low key the good guys and they cannot tear down this corrupt system without like closing off their society from outside influence and all the while. I have had some ideas, guys.
Just as no one is ever 100% correct about anything, neither is anybody 100% wrong on everything. So there's, just because China is, the Chinese Communist Party is an inherently evil force, inherently coercive force, does not mean that there aren't, because there has to be a reason why they maintain support. There has to be some things that they do correctly. It's hard for people to acknowledge that kind of stuff. It's like the conundrum of, wow, the realization that Hitler wasn't a monster, he was a human. And I was kind of talking with someone in the radio station about this, but like he was a little weird about it. But it's
the Nazis were misunderstood conversation.
No, it's not the Nazis. It's actually a Jordan Peterson thing. So it's the idea that if you say that Hitler and Stalin were monsters, you deny the reality that they were in fact human beings, and human beings are what committed those atrocities. If you cannot understand that humans, not monsters, but humans are capable of that, then of course you're going to be fine with mandates and and all this other kind of stuff that deeply resembles what authoritarian regimes have done to their enemies prior to completely ostracizing them and removing them entirely from society.
And what roles society puts on a person, how easily people will adapt to those roles. I mean, we can talk about like the Sanford prison experiments, where they took the students and then they established like the pseudo prison system, and they put some people in as prisoners and some people in as guards, and they literally watched the people who were playing the role of the guards like psychologically transform into sociopaths, and they had to end the experiment. And then we take a look at what's going on in Australia, where 2 years ago you had like everyday regular Australian citizens who weren't much different than us. Now we have like people who are actually building COVID quarantine camps that are not going to.
China is more free than Australia.
Yeah.
Right now,
I thought you were cutting me off because I was going to get us banned on Facebook or something. I was like, oh, am I going down the path of ban? Right?
The monster thing, like I tell my kids that all the time. Like Hitler thought he was saving the world. You have to be really careful, because everybody who's evil, who we think of as inherently evil and bad, they all had a good intention. So if you think you have good intentions, but you are standing on the wrong truth. I don't know if they all had
good intentions, but I'm saying some of the most effective ones.
But I don't know if there's a lot of people who are like, I'm genuinely trying to wreck everything.
So Socrates has a point on this. No man intentionally does evil, because in order to intentionally do evil, you have to know what is right and wrong. You can't know everything. You cannot at all points. You have to be motivated by doing good. Like you have to think you're doing the right thing, because when situations arise, you will act on your best interests. You're not inherently doing evil. You think you're doing good, even if the act itself is evil.
Sure. So maybe sometimes people who are genocidal or homicidal or whatever, in their own mind, they think they're administering justice for a human existence that is corrupt beyond
the greater good.
Yeah, like look at China's one-child policy. They thought they were being benevolent, saving everyone from starvation. And it's like one of the most evil things that's ever happened.
Yep, exactly. And the reason why, the reason why it's so important to understand that is because when you look at what's going on the left, the reason why they don't see the similarities is because the Nazis were monsters. I'm not a monster. Therefore, I can't be. Nothing I do is on the level of what they were doing, right? And it's like,
therefore, anything I want to do to them is not inhumane, because they have lost
exactly. Yeah. You can't. When you dehumanize, you remove your own association with it, because you're a human. They weren't. Therefore, what you're doing is human. There's no possible way you could be doing something as bad. It's like, look, if the only difference between the victims in Nazi Germany and the victims in, not the victims, but people in America that are currently under a lot of scrutiny, I'm trying to skirt around this one, is that one of them is based on race or ethnicity, and one of them is based on medical status. If what you're doing is the same things, Where's the difference? The only difference is that you can actually coerce someone into their medical procedure. You cannot coerce someone into changing their race.
Just get vaccinated, you dickbag.
You first.
You first. I've been vaccinated 7 times. I have at this point 50%. Only 50% capacity to contract and spread the virus. So
I got vaccinated by a homeless person in the park.
Well,
I will say that
I'm
it
just
makes
excited.
you feel very
I'm just
like
excited to give my 3-year-old her 8th dose.
Yeah, seriously, man. Like
So
you're on top of it.
I was at work tonight, and we were all discussing like which books we're reading, and I was like, I have to read this book. It's called Atlas Shrugged. I'm not enjoying it, and it's 1,600 pages, but I have to finish it for a class. And my coworker was like, "Oh, what's the class?" And I was like, "Well, it's LPR, and it's called Leadership Program." And she's like, "Okay, but what's the class?" And I was like, "It's called Defenders of Capitalism." And then like her whole face like fell. And like we just kept working, and I was my chipper, happy, warm self, and just kept going like nothing had happened. And a minute later, she goes, "So are your kids gonna get vaccinated?"
Yeah, no.
I was like, "No," but it was funny because it's like I said capitalism, and then she's like,
"You're evil."
We have to bring the word back. I don't know how we got to this place to where what essentially amounts to government force and coercion and redistribution is the moral thing, and any alternative to that is immoral. We have to take it back.
Well, you have dummies, like you even have dummies on the right coming out and saying our capitalist system creates wage slavery and all this other stuff. I'm like, so you work to eat, except in our system you get to choose who you work to eat. Like,
Jason thinks that capitalism is bad. We need to have not a monetary based society, but a resource based society. Like he wants to go back to trading without money. I'm like,
yeah, not even the Native Americans when we landed here were doing that. Every society, like they're finding money from societies that are like in Göbekli Tepe, which is about 10,000 to 14,000 years old, the oldest civilization we've ever found. They have evidence of freaking money. Like,
right. You need some kind of common currency to trade with, because if I'm a fisherman and I need my house painted, what if my painter doesn't want fish?
Yeah. You need some. Yes, exactly. Bam,
well, we both want berries, so I guess I'll go give the berry farmer some fish, and then I'll give the berries to that guy. Like, we need a currency, and he's like, well, we could use anything for currency, blah, blah. And I was like, well, yeah, technically we could. He likes to bring up tally sticks. He's like, we could just go back. There's a reason why even when we had tally sticks, that presented big problems, because you could only trade with people in the tally stick system. Right?
Yeah,
the only thing that gave the tally stick value was the fact that the king demanded taxes paid in tally sticks. But if you don't pay taxes to the king because you're in China, you don't want tally sticks. You want silver bullion.
Yeah.
Did you know China invented paper money?
Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
Did not know.
They invented the printing press, or not the printing press, but paper.
What was it based on?
printing.
Like, what was it based on? Like, ours was originally the gold currency. What was theirs?
Theirs wasn't based on anything. Actually, they started off with fiat currency. It was diktat by the emperor, but they always traded in tea and silk and silver bullion. They liked silver and gold.
Yeah. I mean, precious metals do have a value. Like, that's why they're called precious metals. But currency always comes up because trade always comes up because, like, at the end of the day, like, it's not like there hasn't been thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of freaking years.
Yeah.
Years to get us to where we're at now. We've evolved quite a bit. And you have to be able to realize that to go from the stage of the hunter-gatherer, where you're literally in small packs, to where we're at now, there's processes that take place, and there's, there was a bunch of different experiments on how to do and create a society, and where we're at now is the culmination of all those experiments, and we're seeing how they play out. And so it's like you cannot discredit the fact that I, as an anarcho-capitalist, have to acknowledge the fact that the very first state of humans was complete anarchy, and yet somehow we ended up here. Why is that? Why did we seed all these things? Oh, it turns out that despite me thinking that most people are, tend towards the good. Not saying that people are inherently good, but when given the choice, most people will lean towards the good. War and rape and all this other crap, slavery, all that kind of crap. Also
all these
happened along the
violations
way.
of self-ownership and private property.
Yes. So, I'm not going to say that there shouldn't be governments per se. I'm not going to say that, because at the end of the day, there's a reason why these things exist. There is something to be said for having a modicum of security, being able to be secure in your property and everything like that. But you should never be sacrificing your liberties for that security. I don't know. There's a lot to discuss, but I think we're getting pretty late here, bud.
Yeah, I think we're getting pretty late here too. And I like how we really laser focused on one subject and got a comprehensive conversation around that topic, and that we're all going to leave here more articulate and thoughtful and able to comprehend and share the ideas on that one specific topic that we came up with. So,
that we never
Atlas Shrugged, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a comprehensive review of Atlas Shrugged. Thank you so much.
Not a single one of us is book.
It's a reflection of the amount of fluff that is in the book.
Not a single one of us.
This is basically what reading Atlas Shrugged and trying to figure out what she's talking about as far as the moral of the story. This today's episode is very synonymous with that. So
I was a child of light. Bucky was a child of darkness. So I was the insanely good person, and then
are you kidding me?
I agree with that.
I am Francisco. What is it, D'Anconia? Yeah, I am Francisco D'Anconia. I'm just like, what's up, ladies? How you doing? I'm so good at this. I just mock people all the time. I'm tremendous. All I do is win and mock people and make love.
It is a good book, though. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for sticking around and watching the stream. Savvy, thank you so much for coming on. I personally had a great conversation with you.
Yeah, we should hang out more. This is fun.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back on. Seriously, great insight, great conversation.
Yep.
And we did talk about economics, guys. We talked about it quite a bit.
And Afghanistan.
And some other stuff.
And God.
Yeah.
And quantum physics.
All of that is very important to economics. Ladies and gentlemen.
About capitalism without talking about Schrodinger's cat.
Is the cat there or not? It depends. Are you looking at it? But hey, are we going to be live streaming tomorrow's radio show? Bucky's internet is doing fantastic. If only he had some of that Chinese internet.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, I'm really on. Kind of want to talk about Jared Polis's executive orders.
That what? He's now Blinky Dylan as he blinks in and out of connection here. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm pretty sure we will be streaming our show tomorrow. Catch the Liberty Revolt on 1360 KHNC if you are in the Northern Colorado area.
Just completely lose my license.
Catch us on 1360 KHNC if you're in the Northern Colorado area. Catch us on 1360khnc.com if you're not. Or even better, catch us here on the Liberty Revolt on Facebook, libertyrevoltmedia.com, youtube.com/Liberty Revolt Media. We are the hub of the liberty discussion of Colorado. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Bucky, you got any last words?
The hub of messaging and activism for the liberty movement in Northern Colorado.
We are the Northern... Suck it!
No, seriously, did you guys hear about Jared Polis's executive orders?
Are you talking about the one about the vaccine and you can't get medical care? Is that one?
The hospitals can now turn you down for medical care. He passed two. Executive orders. One putting the Department of Health and Environment can now tell the hospitals that they can refuse. I don't have them exactly right. I need to do more research, but these are things that he passed like 5 days ago and no one is talking about that are a big,
let's talk about it.
Deal. So I want to get into that.
Send him my way.
Yeah, I want to see what Brandon Work is up to. See if he's.
Yep, we'll be doing a super special on why Jared Pullis sucks again.
Jerk off.
He sucked before, but he still sucks now. But anyways,
yeah.
Catch us tomorrow, 5 to 6 p.m. Mountain Time on libertyrevoltmedia.com. No, we don't live stream to there, but you can check out our articles there.
Facebook.com/libertyrevoltmedia, YouTube.com/libertyrevolt, Instagram.com/libertyrevoltmedia if you want to see our meme page, which hasn't been updated
in a very long time.
Because Bucky is tired, folks. Bucky is tired.
And I hate both of them. I hate social media, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you tomorrow.